Now I'd like to invite Katherine Roos. Katherine loves working with entrepreneurs, and she has personally counseled hundreds of small businesses as a business advisor, consultant, and trainer. She has hands-on experience managing her own business and has served small business owners in senior positions both in public and private organizations. As a small business manager for City of Toronto, Economic Development and Cultural Division, Katherine oversees programs that serve more than 35,000 entrepreneurs. She provides input to economic development policy and facilitates linkage within city's diverse business community. She's a graduate of University of Toronto, and she shops regularly at small business throughout Toronto. Katherine is a charter member of TIE Toronto. She's been our guest speaker on earlier occasions. It's always wonderful to listen to her, and please help me welcome Katherine.
Those bios are so boring. I think the shopping thing needed to go in there because it's true. To the chagrin of my husband. Okay, so I'm pretty high energy, but I don't know if I can compete here. I'm going to take a slightly more mercenary approach and just talk about the entrepreneurial landscape and what I see every day at Enterprise Toronto when we see entrepreneurs coming through our doors. So just to stand back, my title is a small business manager in economic development. Most people, when they think of business, hopefully not in this room, but most people when they think of business, they think about these towers on the waterfront, right? Or the stock pages in the Post or whatever. In reality, in a city like Toronto and across Canada, this is small business, right? Think about the neighborhood that you live in. Think about the independent grocer, think about the yoga instructor, the dog walker, the daycare, the independent bookstore, the independent toy store. I'm describing Roncesvalles Village where I live, though this is East and West. But this is the reality of small business. In fact, any economist will tell you that the world of work is actually changing, that we're sort of actually returning to the sort of where our economy was probably 75 years ago. The proportion of people who are self-employed is actually increasing right now. Why is that? Well, it's because service businesses, the cost of entry is much lower than trying to create a manufacturing operation or some other kind of capital-intensive business. We're better educated. We don't necessarily need somebody to break our tasks down to an A, attaches to B, attaches to C. We're quite capable of providing services. We've got the technology that we can work remotely, that we can work from home, that we can work from Spain or from a cruise ship somewhere. And it may not always feel like it. We're always complaining in the entrepreneurial world that there isn't money out there for us to fund our enterprises, to fund growth. But in reality, we're actually richer than we've ever been before. Am I sort of moving out of the camera? Sort of on purpose. Anyway, so the world of work is changing, and more of us are choosing to be self-employed or to build a business in ways that we've never done it before. So in reality, small business is really big business. And even if you get small business, usually the statistics surprise a few of you. So 97% of the 2 million plus businesses in Canada are considered small. That's according to the federal definition, which is 100 employees and under. 90% of all new jobs in Canada, 75% in Ontario. Contribution to GDP, I think I saw something recently, it's around 54%, which is higher than in the US, by the way. Down to the City of Toronto, there are about 85,000 employer businesses in Toronto. And this is the stat that I like the most. Over 75% of employer businesses have fewer than 10 employees. How many people anticipated that? Okay, so you're all small business oriented. Good. Most people are very surprised. Very small business dominated economy. The other thing is, with 130,000 self-employed, Toronto actually has the highest rate of self-employment in Canada. I don't know 100% why that is, but I believe it's so because we have a large enough economy to support lots of sole practitioners, whether they be an independent architect or a lawyer or an accountant, or they're a dog walker or a hairdresser or a daycare operator, that sort of thing. The other thing is that Toronto, of course, is one of, may actually be the most diverse city in the world in terms of cultural diversity, and we know that newcomers actually choose self-employment. more frequently than people who are Canadian born, and I think that contributes to the entrepreneurial culture in the city of Toronto as well. So small business is big business in the world that I work in. Canada is also very entrepreneurial. We are about the third easiest place in the world to register a business. Frequently I have people who are extremely well educated, have phenomenal international business experience. And I remember one guy in particular, he very articulate with me on the phone, and he insisted that he must have a meeting with me to register his business. I said, you can just walk in, sir. And what kind of business was it? Oh, have you thought about, looking for locations? Are you looking, do you need to talk to somebody about building a facility to do that kind of manufacturing here, sir? Blah, blah, blah. No, he wanted an appointment to register the business. Where he came from, it took a year to register a business. He could not comprehend that one could register a business in Canada in 20 minutes. Okay? So we're a really easy place. Despite, our complaints in the media, that sort of thing, we're a pretty easy place to do business. And it's my understanding, actually, that Canadians start twice as many businesses per capita as Americans. So we should stop looking south of the border for all of our best case scenarios, because we're very entrepreneurial up here in Canada. So small business versus entrepreneurship. I think that Sierra has, did I say that right?
Syra.
Syra. Okay. Sorry. There's this continuum, and it's hard to define one from the other. But what is the difference? In my world, every single person out there who chooses to work for themselves is making an economic contribution that I value. Okay? However, people do start businesses for different reasons. I think each of you should think about this here in the room. In the rich Western world, we think that people start businesses because they want to be rich and because they have MBAs. The reality is, around the world, people start businesses every single day out of economic necessity. One can learn how to start a business. You don't have to have an MBA, and you don't have to invent sliced bread or the Post-it note in order to start a business. There are a lot of professions where individuals choose self-employment because that's kind of a convention in that profession. So if you think of artists and actors and writers, okay, if you think about plumbers and electricians, if you think about architects and lawyers and doctors and dentists, in those professions that are highly specialized, people frequently choose to be self-employed. If you think of Toronto has a very strong business services sector, and there are many very successful independent consultants, and they are successful because they're so specialized, one single firm isn't going to buy their services, but many will. Okay? And then there's a whole other breed of person who chooses to start a business, and it's because they want to do it their way. Okay? They don't want to work for the boss anymore. They want to go into work with their dog or their child. They want to work in a collaborative workspace, not in a cubicle. They want to give back to their community in a way that the corporate world doesn't allow them to do. They want to have satisfaction in their job. And that is a very valid reason why people start a business. Then there's this last category. And this is this isn't so personal. True entrepreneurs identify a market opportunity, and they pursue that relentlessly with tenacity and all the other adjectives that the previous presentation covered. Okay? And I believe that that's what Thai Institute and ThaiQuest are all about. It's really supporting the entrepreneurs in that category. So each one of you in this room, I hope you do think about what your motivations are to start a business. It doesn't mean that you can't start working in your basement because you want to work that way, and you ultimately identify a giant opportunity that you want to pursue with a great deal of tenacity. But the difference, in my opinion, between a true entrepreneur and all the rest who choose self-employment is this focus on market opportunity. This is the definition of entrepreneurship that I pulled from Inc.com. And in fact, if I was allowed to engrave things on the walls of civic centers, which are considered heritage properties, I would in the Enterprise Toronto offices, but I like this. Entrepreneurship is the pursuit of opportunity without regard to resources currently controlled. Okay? And I think the article at Inc.com said the best definition ever. For what it's worth. Anyway, I like it. What are entrepreneurial opportunities? What do they look like? Well, they generally identify a market with a big problem to solve. Now, when I say big problem, it can be a simple problem, but there's a lot of it, okay? Generally speaking, there's a unique value proposition. Nobody else is doing it quite that way, whether it's a low-cost option, whether it's approaching things from the left side versus the right side, whatever. There's usually a scalable business model. In other words, there's a way to make money that you can grow big. There's an ability to execute fast, particularly because there's a desire to maximize return on investment for shareholders of some company, whether that's just the entrepreneur and their founders, or whether that's external investors. Okay, now this is a Katherine Roos slide. I'm sure there are other definitions of true entrepreneurial opportunities, but this is how I've defined it through scanning a number of articles. So who's entrepreneurial? Well, as I said, there's this big continuum that runs from lifestyle businesses and people choosing self-employment out of economic necessity through to people who grow a family business because they want to do things a certain way, and then there's this entrepreneurial end. Well, economists, and I found studies, I found SAS Canada data, I found some stuff out of the US, and I found some stuff out of Europe, and generally speaking, between 4 and 8% of companies in North America are considered growth-oriented, okay? And there's a variety of different definitions. So it's really a minority of businesses that probably fall into this entrepreneurial category. Now, the term gazelle was actually coined just over 10 years ago, but a prof at, what's the business school at Ryerson, or at Western, sorry. He defined, at Ivy, yes, thank you. Gazelles experience about 20% employment growth per annum over a 3 to 5 year period. Okay? So it's a pretty rapid, steady, constant rate of growth. And I'll get into some of the myths and things about entrepreneurs, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, indicators of potential growth. Once a company gets over 20 employees, so I talked about that sweet spot, 3/4 of businesses under 10. Once you get to 20, likelihood of going really big is a lot higher. Tech isn't the only growth sector, as I said, and exporting is often a good indicator, but it's not necessary. Those are just some of the things that I picked out of the articles that I was scanning before coming here today. So I just thought I'd look a little closer to home at the Profit Hot 50, which I think was released 2 weeks ago. And but I was very proud. I'm a little biased because I work for the City of Toronto, but 17 of those 50 Hot 50 companies are from Toronto, so I was proud of that. Anyway, the average 2-year growth rate for the Profit Hot 50 was over 1,000%, and in fact, the top company, #1 on the 2012 Hot 50 list, had a 2-year growth rate of 32,000%. So huge growth. But again, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay. Something that I found interesting, there's so many myths about funding of startups. 98%, which was sort of silly, I guess 49 out of the 50 entrepreneurs use their personal resources in getting their business up and running. All right, so everybody thinks that you're going to get a venture investor to finance your startup, but you're going to have some skin in the game, folks. The average age was 39. Now, one of the myths out there is that all entrepreneurs are young, and that's not necessarily true. Though I will tell you, as an economic developer, encouraging youth entrepreneurship is hugely critical, and so another reason why I'm very supportive of the TIE Institute, because, little known fact, but 70% of employers today are baby boomers, and they're just about to retire. So we need jobs, so you folks who are under the age of 39 now need to start businesses faster than you ever have before. Okay. But typically, people are actually a little older than most people would assume. Everybody's talked about how hard you need to work in an entrepreneurial venture. Well, the Profit Hot 50 entrepreneurs on average work 60 hours per week, and I actually a lot higher than that. And interestingly, almost all are profitable. And I threw that in there because I've been participating in this social media conversation about profit versus cash flow. And what that says to me, and I'm not an accountant, so if somebody wants to jump in, but what that says to me is that people have traction, they're making money, and they're reinvesting in growth. Okay, so assuming that you can get lots of financing and sit in your on your duff and just burn through cash, that's not going to make it. So myths about entrepreneurs. So Sarah talked about risk taking. That's one of the myths I like to tackle, because in my opinion, or when I meet with entrepreneurs, when I've read articles, seen the literature, entrepreneurs are less about risk-taking. They don't jump out of airplanes just for fun, okay? They're less about risk-taking than they are about calculating risk. Anybody that I've met who's a very successful entrepreneur is very calculated about risk. And they have a really good sense of self. They know exactly what they can and cannot handle, and they're willing to take they're willing to accept whatever's going to happen if the risk doesn't fall through. So they're good at picking themselves up on the rare occasions when they do fail. I've heard many people think that entrepreneurs are egotistical and self-centered, and I would suggest to you that the opposite is actually true. Having worked for myself for many years, when you work for yourself, you encounter every single day things that you stink at. Okay, so in my opinion, true entrepreneurs are actually very self-aware and far more self-aware than most people would realize. What they do, though, which is smart, is they build an organization around their strengths. And they know darn well how to pick, to choose the right people to work with them to make up for the challenges that they face. So if you're sitting in this room and you're thinking, I don't know if entrepreneurship's for me because I'm really good at this, but I stink at that, that's okay. First step is knowing you have, is admitting it, okay? And then finding the partners that help you. Same thing, some people think that entrepreneurs are so single-minded that they're really loners, they're eccentric, they're dreamers. In reality, no one will ever succeed as an entrepreneur unless they know how to work with other people, unless they know how to connect with customers and investors and all those other critical people that help put a business together. So again, if you know you're an introvert, find yourself some partners that can help you over that. Again, I addressed the business about all entrepreneurs being young. That's not necessarily the case. Ciara addressed the last two bullets. You do not need to have an MBA. I see people every day who are driven to learn the business skills they need, and typically entrepreneurs aren't rich. They don't grow up with silver spoons in their mouth, and in fact the research would suggest that people who have experienced some kind of economic challenges at some point in their life are more likely to choose entrepreneurship than those who grow up with the silver spoon. So just thought I would address some of those myths right up front. So keys to entrepreneurial success, and again, I'm not going to dwell on this, but you really need to know who you are and what you're good at. You need to have an in-depth knowledge of the market that you serve and the business you're undertaking. At Enterprise Toronto, I serve anybody who's interested in business, so a lot of these folks who just want to create a job for themselves. And when I see somebody walk in the door and they want to get into the computer field because they think there's lots of money to be made there, but they've never turned a computer on, I have a bit of concern. You need to have a good business plan, and I think that one of the things I love about the way Lalit has made adjustments to the Thai Institute schedule this year is you're going to be introduced to the very latest thinking on business planning. So when I talk about a business plan, I'm not necessarily talking about that traditional 100-page document that sits on a shelf, you write it for a banker, you never look at it again. A good business plan is a roadmap. It means establishing a dashboard with metrics. It means focusing on the customer, all these kinds of good things that my fellow speakers are going to follow up with. But again, you need to have a plan of attack if you're going to succeed. You need to have some cash flow management and some business management skills. There's no doubt about that. You can learn them, but it's really critical that you do develop some of those skills. And/or you need to hire yourself a general manager who's good at that. But even then, in my experience with small businesses, is you need to be able to manage the people that you need to manage. So you better know something about money. You better know something about marketing. You better be committed. So whether you talk about tenacity or persistence or any of those other kinds of adjectives, you need to be committed to executing on your plan. And you know why, more than anything, is when you're in the early stages, when you're virtually working alone, there are going to be days when you just don't want to get up. And who else is going to motivate you? There's no boss that's going to tell you to take the rest of the afternoon, because you're going to have shareholders and customers and bankers and advisors and landlords all calling. Okay? They all are going to demand something from you. So better be committed to what you're going to do. And this last bullet, again, this comes from my personal experience. I have never met an entrepreneur who wasn't a lifelong learner. So if that's not you, the door's over there. There's always something to be learned. And I was facilitating a focus group at a business incubator a couple of years ago, and we thought we were really smart. We were going to develop some training programs and seminars, and so my really clever question for the focus group was, tell me how you learn. And one of the entrepreneurs who had arrived late, and he was sort of frazzled because he'd been dealing with a problem or a crisis, and he scoffs and he says to me, he says, oh, come on, the business teaches you every single day. Okay? And that's really the truth of running a business. So you're always going to be learning something new. And I think that goes to the slide that you used, Sarah, about challenges, that I think that true entrepreneurs really thrive on tackling big challenges. So causes of business failure, it's really the exact opposite. So lack of planning, lack of commitment, lack of customer market knowledge. This fourth bullet, I think, is very important. This unwillingness to accept advice or listen to the marketplace. It's the biggest way to turn off an investor, for sure. But if you're going to succeed, you got to listen. And in fact, there's a quote that I actually had in my home office, in my bulletin board in the corner, that I looked at it all the time, and I'm going to forget who said it. Anyway, when in doubt, follow the customer. You know, there's people you're always going to have to listen to, so you better get good at it. Cause of business failure, just poor business management skills, and that may be also not having the right business advisors around you, and lack of financing. I put that at the very bottom, though, because yes, if there's a big opportunity and you need financing to stimulate really rapid growth, lack of financing can be a barrier. But I've seen all these other things shut businesses down long before lack of financing. So, do you have what it takes? Are you a self-starter? Can you follow through? Can you take advice? Can you tolerate uncertainty? Again, with the kind of clients that I serve who are starting up micro businesses, I so often have people coming to me and they want me to manage them in an advisory session. And that tells me something about them. Okay? Can you adapt to change? Are you persistent? And can you pick yourself up after a failure? And there's my contact information. If I can help, I'm happy to do so. Thank you very much.